The Real Weather Watch on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Soybean School. Find us at soybeanschool.com. We're joined right now on RealAgriculture.com by Drew Lerner. He is owner of World Weather Incorporated. Welcome today, Drew.
Hey, thanks for having me today.
Drew, let's jump right in and talk about the Western Canadian prairie forecast. Certain areas have got off to an early start as far as winter's concerned, with snow, and some areas in Manitoba getting quite a bit of rain as we close up fall. What kind of winter can we expect on the prairies?
I think we're not going to be too far off from normal this year, but we will have a little bit of a drier bias and a slight warmer bias in some of the western areas, while the weather in the east will have a little bit of a cooler bias, but not necessarily extremely cold. I guess kind of bouncing around a little bit is the best way to put it. We have had some favorable conditions here recently, and we really need to have a relatively normal winter. We didn't have that last year. We're hoping that we will see a little bit more precipitation. We certainly need that. A big part of southern Saskatchewan, of course, is still very dry, and we do need to get some moisture there. It's not just there. There's a bigger portion of the prairies that do need some moisture as well. So anyway, the bottom line is that we will see a succession of weather systems moving across the prairies that will help us out a little bit. But I think when we get to spring and turn around, let's say March. When we get to March and turn around and look back, we're going to say, well, it was an okay winter, but we really still need moisture. We're lacking it in many areas, and I think that's where we'll come out of in the starting gates for the spring.
Now, of course, last year, many people remember that there was a lot of people forecasting this uber cold winter that was going to just put all of us in the deep freeze. We got exactly the opposite. Is there that kind of potential this year for something to happen that we don't expect that's going to turn this sort of normal winter into something else?
Well, surely, Sean, after all your experience on doing these kinds of recordings, you know that there's not a meteorologist or a climatologist this side of Mars that really knows what he's talking about, right? I think that it's really, we look at the statistics, and we can make comparisons to past years, and we can do all of the homework we want to do, but it's really out of our hands. And I think the best thing we can say to that question is that, yeah, there's always a chance that we're going to blow it, because we are meteorologists, and that's what we do best, I suppose. But in reality, last year was something that it was part of the Arctic oscillation that developed during about this time last year. We went into the positive phase of that pattern, and everyone was of the opinion that it was not going to be a prevailing pattern, and we kind of all just kind of ignored it until it had festered for several weeks, and we realized, maybe this is something that's going to be around for a while. And so we ended up with that very dry and very warm year. Definitely a surprise. And the La Nina that we had last year was very wimpy as well, and so that was also a factor. I think most people were expecting the La Nina event to be a little bit more of a significant event. This year, we don't have a La Nina. We don't even have an El Nino. In fact, a few weeks ago, we thought we were going to have an El Nino, and that was influencing the forecast for the prairies. And to be honest with you, I was really expecting to be able to tell you, if you had interviewed me a few weeks ago, I would have told you that it was going to be another drier than usual winter, and with the temperatures probably a little bit warmer than usual, because a lot of times that's what we get with an El Nino. But we're not going to see that. El Nino is definitely not going to evolve. And so we're going to be relying upon an 18-year cycle that's playing out in the atmosphere. That 18-year cycle is going to produce a lot of cold air in the eastern part of North America, both eastern Canada and down into the eastern parts of the U.S. And those areas will have several bouts of impressive cold. And when that is occurring, it'll be warmer out here on the western side of the prairie, or western side of the nation, and the prairies in particular. Probably see the warmer bias occurring periodically in Alberta, and in fact. So the precipitation pattern when we get into these cold surges is going to be very limited, because there's going to be all this cold Arctic air coming down through the middle of the country, and that's going to limit the amount of moisture that can flow into the areas. That's why I think we'll have the below average precipitation bias. and we'll also have that little bit of a split personality with Manitoba probably tilted more towards the cool side, and Alberta definitely towards the warmer side of normal during the course of the winter.
So it's starting to sound like this is kind of one of those winters where, low amount of precipitation through the winter, but we're going to be really keeping our fingers crossed for that spring dump of snow.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. When we can get the temperatures to gyrate in the late winter and early spring, there's probably a pretty good chance we'll be able to bring in some moisture as well and crank out a storm or two and come into the spring growing season in fairly good shape. And I think that's still a viable possibility. It certainly looks as though that we'll do better in the spring than we will this winter, I think.
Okay, Drew, thanks a lot.
All right, thank you.